Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome to Debbie and Logan's Mom and Son vlog. We're happy you're joining us today. Today's question is a good one and an important one. What are some of the challenges of being a parent to an adult child, and how does it differ from when your child was younger than 18 years old? And as I've been thinking about this, I realized that a lot of the answers to this question aren't that different for a fully abled adult child and a disabled child, other than the disabled child might need, want, or ask for more help. But the way you handle that is still similar. The first thing that comes to my mind is when we're parenting a child, if we're with the doctor or if we're with other people, we speak for the child. And then what happens is they become emerging adults, we're still speaking for them. And that hasn't worked out well between Heather and Logan and me when I've done that.
Yes, it's a challenge to, well, I was just thinking while you were talking about the teenage years and when that sort of the separation of powers, if you will, where you are your own person, but your parents are still telling you what to do, especially in a hospital setting when you are the patient. When I am the patient, I couldn't speak for myself, so you obviously had to speak for me over and over and over, through 25 surgeries, and so you basically knew my situation better than I did. So I didn't really want to know how difficult my situation is, so I just kind of let you do that. But I also was very bitter about it, and still it's a challenge for me as a almost 42-year-old man to deal with the needs that I have when it comes to communicating. When I'm around mom, I tend to divert it to her, so it's not that she's doing it. I don't want her to do it, it's that she's doing it, and it's uncomfortable, but I also don't want to do it. And so it's challenging to experience that, but there's a very real, sure decision that I am making to not talk, as much as I feel like and have blamed her in the past for talking before I can talk. And the reality is that I'm just kind of not talking either. And so she just talks. And so that is what happens, I think, with a lot of children with disabilities.
Yeah, I agree. It's very challenging for any parent, but especially a parent who has adult children with disabilities. And this kind of leads into the importance of respecting your adult child's privacy, which means not telling other people personal aspects of your adult child's life. For example...
But you're telling the doctors. You are literally telling other people about my private stuff for me. So you have to.
That's
so why wouldn't you do that with other people, right?
Well, that's true, but if you're with me, it's best if I ask you, would you like me to tell the doctor what you need to communicate? Or would you like me to... I can ask you before the conversation, like with my daughter Heather, who was 44 and a half. She passed in July, but she has all the same disabilities as Logan. They're both on the autism spectrum, but Heather was a little bit more affected by autism than Logan. So I would find myself talking about Heather when Heather was with me often, and then she would correct me and remind me. And what she taught me is I need to give her space. That if I give her space, she can think of something to say. Or that I can also say, Heather, what would you like to say about this? What would you like to add to this? Would you like to tell the doctor what you've been experiencing? So that's how I've worked it out with Heather. With Logan, I think he has a lot more of the upsetting emotions that he just expressed. So it makes it real hard for him to...
When you're upset, you can't talk. And I'm upset all the time and have been throughout my whole life. Just kind of in general, kind of an upset experience. But that's sort of what I'm proud to have been able to observe my experience to do this and still, be alive to try and communicate my experience and at the same time share it with my mom for a lot of things, or for the first time for you, because I haven't communicated to you.
I'd like to add, Logan and I are actually learning a lot about each other and our relationships together as an adult, even as we do this vlog. So it's something that you continue learning and growing your relationship with your adult child along the way. And when you hit snags, you learn to deal with them in a healthy way. One thing that's important is to allow your adult child to make their own choices, even if you don't agree with them, to respect their choices.
I mean, it depends on what their choices are. I mean, what if their choices directly contradict all of the work that you had to do to keep us alive and keep us, as a single mother, then it's pretty hard to allow that kind of decision to be made.
It is hard, and speaking from a parent that has to do that, it is hard. However, I've always valued Heather and Logan's self-esteem and their independence, so I have allowed them to make decisions. For example, Heather did lung therapy twice a day, and it was grueling for her, an hour in the morning, an hour at night, every single day, because they have a lung disease, and Logan doesn't do that. I just accept that because he has his own reasons why he doesn't do that.
Yeah, it's just I don't want to work at being here on top of being here. Not that I am at a low point. I'm trying to communicate low pointed stuff, but I'm not in a new place, really. I've sort of always been where I'm at, and I think that being on the spectrum keeps me the same. I feel like I'm the same way as I was as an 8-year-old child as far as how I look at the world. I see things the same way. So it's not that I'm like all of a sudden now I'm so bad or that I'm so depressed or anything.
So you're saying that you have a baseline personality that has remained the same through your childhood, teenager, and now adulthood.
Yes.
You have a baseline personality, and all of our kids and your kids will have that baseline personality, and that's what you'll have to work with as you ask yourself each question when you get into individual situations with them about some of these issues. And one thing that really helped me is to remember that Heather and Logan are separate from me. They came to this earth through me, but they don't belong to me. They're not mine. They are individual human beings who make their own choices, have their own goals, and experience is a much better teacher than giving advice. It's hard not to give advice, but that's another thing with your adult children is they don't want your advice unless they ask for it. And unsolicited advice comes through as criticism. I still remember a time when I was at my grandma and grandpa's house and they were in their 80s. They were complaining about how my dad never came to see them and they really missed him and he never came over. And then another time they invited him to dinner and here he is, a full-grown man in his mid-60s and they're in their mid-80s. My grandma finally has her son at the dinner table with her and she starts complaining about his facial hair. And it was just really interesting to see her basically parenting him like he's a child. There's nothing wrong with stating your opinion, but you have to remember that it does come across as criticism. And if your child feels criticized when they're around you, they aren't going to come around you. So choosing your words carefully is important.
Yeah, but you can only use the words that you have as well. You can't really be wrong necessarily. Obviously, certain behaviors or lack of communication can create quote-unquote wrong results, but it's not wrong to do the only thing that you know how to do.
No, it's not wrong. What happens is you do what you do automatically and naturally and normally, and then you watch the results that you get. If you don't like the results that you get, you change something that you're doing or the way you're handling a situation. That's always a good teacher, to watch the results, watch people's reactions to you. If they're defensive, take a look at what you just said. Something caused them to be defensive. They didn't just suddenly get defensive. So it's a really good rule of thumb to look at what you're doing that's creating the relationship that you have with your adult child.
Yeah, I agree.
Along those lines is don't assume anything. If you want to find out something about your adult child, ask them. Don't assume anything. Don't assume they want your help. It's important to ask your child if they want your input or your advice, to ask your child if they want your help with something. Logan, of course, has a lot to say about how much help he needs or wants or can accept or not accept.
It's kind of difficult to assess, being that I still need help that a lot of 42-year-old men don't need, but I also realize that I can't have her doing things that I can do, or I lose any sort of autonomy and self-esteem. It's a balance that I have to do.
And as you're balancing it, it gets tricky because you could use a lot more help, but you have reasons why you don't ask for it.
The balancing act is between the help that I need and the help that I want to accept. Because I'm sure that you want to help as much as, Mama Bear wants to help.
That's true.
And I don't want you to help, but I need you to help, but I don't want you to help. So that creates friction in our relationship throughout our lives.
So what I've been learning to do, and will continue learning to do for the future of our relationship, is I'll ask Logan, do you want me to take a load of laundry home since I'm here and I have time to do a load of laundry, and then he doesn't have to do all the mechanics himself with his disabilities of doing the laundry, and I don't ask all the time, just once in a while. And I also let him know that if he really wants me to do it on a regular basis, all he needs to do is ask. I used to do Heather's laundry on a regular basis. It's just so important to ask if they want your help. And if I think of something that I see that he might be able to use help with, I ask him. And that's really helped a lot, hasn't it, Logan?
Yeah, it helps. I still have to struggle with my own inner dialogue about it. It's never easy thing for me to accept when I need help or when I take help. It really is still very rare that I allow help. It's hard to not be too much about disability and not be enough normal human experience.
Well, just remember, these adult kids are going to go off and have kids of their own, and their parents are going to have opinions about how they raise their kids, so they have other issues too. You have your disabilities that play into our parenting, but other people have other issues too.
Yeah.
So I think everything that you say is relevant in regards to...
my need for you to do laundry would not be the same for an able-bodied 42-year-old man. Although it happens, obviously.
It sure does. And I'm sure any of you who've had your adult child move back in the house face that. You just find yourself doing things for your adult child that you did when they were a child because they're living with you. And then you've got a lot of extra work and they let you do it, or they get offended if you do it. It's different for all of you, and you have to handle that in every situation.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to define, is what is from that relationship. Even though they're adults, you still automatically revert to that caretaker position. I think most mothers probably do that.
Absolutely.
Most humans as adults will let someone do anything that they don't have to do. It's just a sort of natural thing to happen. So it's not like it's wrong. It's only wrong if one of you is taking advantage in that you're doing it to control them. Obviously that's not okay.
And watching your child's reaction will tell you. So Logan gets triggered by me if I talk too much or raise my voice too much or get too bossy, or, right, Logan? So
yes.
The triggers affect how much help Logan can accept, how much he can ask for, how much he needs.
Yeah, it's hard to talk about triggers and not sound crazy, because I can't tolerate your personality. Anybody that has a similar personality, I can't tolerate, and that's why I stay alone. I stay isolated so that I don't have the reaction that I've always had with Mom, but it happens with everybody. And it's not controllable. It's just, the reaction is controllable, but the trigger is not controllable. And so I put a lot of effort into stopping my natural response to things and people so that it's not inappropriate.
Well, I think everybody gets triggered by their parents. I mean, I won't speak for everybody, but I was a hairstylist for 40 years, and we talked a lot about how our parents triggered us. My mom was always late. It didn't matter what the situation was. She was late for my wedding. My flowers were late for my wedding because my mom did my flowers. She was that way very consistently. And so you ask yourself, they've always been this way, so why am I triggered? And that is something good to ask yourself and to see if you can make other decisions about it. It's challenging when you're triggered, but that's where it's really important to schedule time to sit down together and just become friends and talk and treat your job as you are now fired from being a parent and you have a new job that is to be your adult children's mentor. A mentor is there to listen, to talk back and forth, to hear ideas, not to give advice unless they ask for it, and just be a good listener and get to know your child, and then you get to know the triggers and what works best to handle them. Like with Logan and I said, I understand you get triggered and you scream at me or yell at me, and I understand, but what I want you to do is apologize. And that's what I've learned to do too, is to apologize if I do something that offends Logan or triggers him. And same with Heather. We would get into a discussion sometimes about the way I responded or acted towards a situation with her. And sometimes I was so defensive that I knew she was right, but my defensiveness was telling her that I was acting as if she was wrong. That's been a hard one for me, and then I realize what I'm doing, and then I come back and I apologize and tell them that they're right. But it usually takes me some time to get back to being authentic instead of being my defensive child that still lives in me.
Everybody is a little bit defensive depending on the person or the context or whatever. It's a reflex that is exacerbated by trauma.
I've heard adults say, wow, I caught myself acting like my parent, my mother, or my father the other day, and I can't believe I did that because I swore I would never act that way. But we all do it. We're human, and we resort to what's programmed, and it's a lot of effort sometimes, but if you're committed, changing that program really helps all your relationships. Another idea I was thinking about that's really good is to talk to your adult child. If they haven't initiated moving out, just to talk to them about what their thoughts are about moving out, their feelings, because I think it's really good to encourage your healthy adult child to live on their own, but also your disabled child to live on their own if that's possible. Sometimes you don't find out if it's possible until they try it, or sometimes you just know. So you follow your instincts and the conversation that you have with them. For example, when Heather stayed living with me until I got remarried and we bought a new home. So the home that Heather and I were living in together, because Logan had already moved out on his own, it was time for Heather to start thinking about moving out or having an apartment in my basement. So we went to lunch, and it was a hard conversation to have because Heather was more disabled than Logan autistically, and I didn't know she was autistic at the time either. She wasn't diagnosed until her late 20s. She was disabled. I had mixed emotions about encouraging her to move out on her own. So we had this discussion, and she was saying families in other cultures that love their families and they stay together, they don't separate. I just don't understand why adults don't keep living with their parents, or why we all separate and move all around the globe. So I talked to her about the rewards that you get through being independent and the privacy that you have. It's just new adventures. It's really good to encourage them. So we did get a place for Heather, and she grew, and she lived alone until she was 44 and a half when she left this earth, found a new home. She just really learned a lot and grew a lot. She did meet someone, which leads me to another topic, which is let your adult children make their own decisions, whether you agree with them or not. And they have to suffer the consequences and learn from it themselves. So Heather met a guy. They really hit it off, and they seemed so happy together. Well, it had only been 3 weeks since they met, and they were talking about moving in together. Of course, I had concerns. Number one, I don't know this guy. Number two, it's really fast. But I thought, so what's the worst thing that can happen? They'll find out that they don't live well together. They'll move apart. They ended up living together for 13 years. He was a great partner, and her aide, he made all of her food for her. He helped her with everything that was hard for her. So it worked for both of them. It worked for me and Logan. You've lived on your own since you were 18. Even though it's hard for you to live on your own because of your disabilities, what are some of the really strong reasons that you stay living alone? Some of the rewards that you get?
Well, obviously life wouldn't be good if I was being triggered all day long with the person that I live with. It would just be a hellish experience.
And you were saying yesterday that you're not only triggered by the person that you live with, but you also get triggered by yourself?
Yeah, the triggers that I get from the people that are closest to me are also sort of the triggers that I get. So I don't like to make noise. If I'm around other people, I don't make noise. I basically don't want to show any sign of myself being there, or it becomes stressful for me. And I am sure that PTSD is part of it. There's a condition called misophonia that is probably the most accurate depiction of what I'm dealing with. I think that being on the spectrum, it's a little more global because it's not just sounds, it's movements, it's the way someone responds to a text. And so it's very hard for me to endure that. And certainly I don't want to treat other people badly either. I think that there can be an understanding where obviously that's always going to happen, but if I can describe what's happening as often and as well as possible. I don't want to say I have to have people change themselves in order for me to be around them, but they have to be able to compromise. Probably their excitement is probably the biggest thing that I do not want and cannot tolerate.
So would you consider the excitement that you're talking about when it's unauthentic excitement?
No, I mean, just someone who just really likes to talk, someone who is energetic, someone who's not aware of their own effect that they have on people.
So would that be summed up by we're all more comfortable being around someone that's a similar energy level to our own?
Of course, and everybody knows how hard it is to like your boss or like your coworker or whatever, but you do it and you get through it and maybe even befriend them a little bit, and that is how you get through life. You're able to do that, and I'm just not able to do that when it starts happening. It's probably the main reason why the last job I had was like over 10 years ago, and while there are other reasons for losing that job, a big thing for me was a lot of people didn't follow rules. Well, I never reacted. I was just having the little explosions in my head all day long, and it just becomes really hard to endure being that upset all the time and still have to be a civil coworker. And I imagine that since it is so bad with the people that I'm closest to, whomever is helping me eventually is going to get close to me, and I'm going to be upset at them rustling papers or sweeping too loudly or vacuuming or anything. It's very upsetting. I also think that I've spent a lot of time examining what this is, and that it's not me, like it's a different part of me, but it's not me, because me is generally nice. I'm a nice person. Most people like me, and I like being liked, like anybody.
Yeah, that's true. And that's a really good point to make, Logan, is that we all have reactions that are programmed. And when those reactions occur, they aren't who we are. They're just a reaction. It's so good to remember that we're not our bodies, we're not our cars, we're not our financial situation, we're not our disabilities or our abilities. We're not our reactions either.
But we are responsible for our reaction, though.
We are responsible for our reactions, so when they happen...
That's just life, like you stepped in a puddle.
That really reminds me of a great story. I was visiting my dad in Florida. I was at least 50 by then, which means that he was in his 70s. We were outside talking. He'd gotten in a fight with my sister, and she didn't want to talk to him, and he was basically defending himself and saying that it's my house and it's my rules. And at that moment, I was inspired to say, well, you're right, Dad. It's your house. It's your rules. And you can expect everybody to follow all your rules while they're here visiting. However, you have to remember that they're adults and they may choose to not come and visit you, to not come to your home, to not be around you, because they don't want to behave the way you feel they should behave. Then we finished our conversation and I went back in the house. We were all watching TV and my dad came in and he opened up the door. It was like an aha moment for him, and he said, wow, I just realized I was treating you like a child and you're in your 50s, you're an adult. He didn't apologize, but it was just a wonderful moment for me to see my dad look at his own behavior and have an important realization that could help his relationships with us.
Yeah. Talking about this or having this discussion with you is traumatic.
I noticed when Logan and I were making our last episode about helping versus enabling, and I was talking about not talking for your adult child. I realized in that vlog how often I was talking for Logan, and he noticed it too. I want you to know, especially the topic that we're covering today, it's not easy for Logan or for me. We're both getting triggered in one way or another constantly.
Yes, it's traumatic to bring up challenging psychological experiences.
Well, he was even saying that it reminded him of being in therapy, but we only went to therapy once, and that was back when he was probably in his late 20s or early 30s. But
yeah,
if any of you have ever been to therapy with your spouse or your child, it feels very confrontive.
Yeah, at this point, we don't have Heather here anymore, and I feel like I still need something from this experience of this life, and that's why I want to do this. I just know that you are, a strong woman and has gotten yourself this far. You're an embattled woman, you're an assertive woman, and you know what you want and generally get the reaction that's not going to cause you to be defensive. Knowing that I can't be myself and not be offensive to you kind of makes the situation where I'm trying to not offend you or disrespect you or things, but I'm also struggling with stuff that I can't really even bring up because you're just like, nope. It's very clear.
There are a few conversations that Logan and I could have in these vlogs where Logan shares certain experiences or certain details or certain emotions that are a lot different than what I would share publicly. So it's very interesting for us to work together because what we want to deliver for each other and for you is to have an authentic conversation together.
With any relationship, you kind of have to tailor your personality to that relationship. Being that my personality is what I've already described it as, you have a very stable, strong purpose. You're very purposeful with your existence.
Well, what's interesting is I just suggested that not being defensive is a really good thing a really good personality characteristic to strengthen in yourself with your adult kids, and it's probably my greatest difficulty is not being defensive. So even hearing Logan communicate honestly and authentically like this, then it makes me want to defend myself in some way. I'm learning along with all of you how to have a better relationship with our adult children.
Yeah, it's challenging, and I think that I'm coming up against something I can't gloss over. With this question, probably mainly this question in particular, is why this is difficult. As much as I want to be as honest about this as possible, I can't because life is still as challenging as it ever has been. and more so because of COVID. And to try and talk about something that I am suffering from, obviously it's hard. It would be hard for anybody. Harder than I guess I think it is.
Is the context that you're talking about, that you're suffering in working with me in regards to this question, is that the suffering you're referring to, or suffering in general?
Well, suffering in general, sort of the biggest issue, but not being able to ask for help because I can't stand somebody. There's no reason for me to expect them to be anything different than them. That's them. I don't expect that to change. I don't expect you to be anything different. I'm trying to describe you as someone that I respect and that has made unfathomable decisions throughout your life, and very important decisions for me. And lots of these decisions are not wrong or right decisions. They are just, you choose one or the other, that's it, black or white, and there's no fault in it really. But that still leaves me with having to struggle with chores, adulting, which a lot of adults, younger adults nowadays, are talking about that. I don't know anyone that's about 40 years old that doesn't allow themselves to openly say that they don't like being an adult. I don't think anyone enjoys it. I've tried to be an adult, and I have successfully. I'm still here. When I was younger, I was able to do a lot of things that I didn't know that I was doing very difficult tasks at that age. It was not as difficult as it is now, but it was still difficult enough to make me not have the type of experience that I was wondering why I wasn't having a better experience when I was doing all of these things. While I was being an adult, I was not getting the reward for it. It was just making it harder to do better.
It was grueling?
Yeah, it was grueling. But I don't know that I could say that and have not one person go, yeah, it is grueling. Life is grueling. Life is grueling for everybody. That's what it is for most people. But when you have disabilities, it sucks.
Well, it's adding a lot of other difficulties on top of the normal difficulties that everyone else is experiencing as being an adult. And there's certain things that you do as an adult that you are rewarded, but if your focus isn't on the rewards and it's only on how grueling it is, it's going to be even harder.
Well, the reward of being independent and being a man was worth it in my 20s. That was what I wanted. That's all I ever wanted as a child, was to be in control of myself in my life. And I was able to hobble through it with my challenges. I think that even in the documentary, Logan Syndrome, it's showing that where I got to a workable life, but you don't see friends in the movie, you don't see relationships in the movie really, other than family. And I mean, I think it's a lot to do with being on the spectrum, but regardless of the reason for it, I've never not been struggling with, oh, I have to take the garbage out soon, or I have to do the laundry soon, I have to do the dishes, which I don't do. I only use one plate, one spoon, one fork, one knife, and I wash it right after I use it. I haven't used a dishwasher since I moved out of my mom's house. It's physically impossible to take on that task on top of having the OCD, which really wants to make it clean. And it's just physically impossible to do that and want to do anything else. Like, I don't want to also go out and sit in an uncomfortable table with a friend. I want to talk with them. I want to be with them, but I don't want to experience some of the negative aspects of being out in public brings me. It's not worth it, unfortunately. I mean, it's kind of a similar balance between this question as well as friendships. Like, what's the challenge of having friendships and maintaining friendships with other adults?
Some of them are very similar. If you want to give your friend a lot of advice, when your friend wants to be listened to, it's going to affect your relationship. I've certainly experienced that. Or if I want to share something, a problem that I have with someone, it makes them sad that I'm having trouble and all they want to do is help me. So they start giving me advice. Or something that I am guilty of is sharing it personal experience as an example of saying, see, I've experienced what you're talking about, but what that is is a form of advice. I experienced this, this is what I did. So it's trying to hide my advice, but it's not intentional. It's my way of trying to show them that I have compassion and empathy for what they're going through because I've been through something similar. But then I have to remember I couldn't talk to my mom because she would always turn the conversation to herself. And I have to be really careful of that since I was programmed with that growing up with my mom who did that, and also someone who does feel a lot of compassion and empathy for others experiencing the human condition and all the challenges and the grueling responsibilities that Logan's talking about.
I know that I want to be able to talk about all the things that we've talked about. I'm not trying to not talk about the things. And a lot of my behaviors are manufactured so that they're appropriate and believable, not deceptive, just not natural. Because being natural, I get asked what's wrong all the time. So I can't be natural. So I have to be, again, it's me. I'm a nice person and stuff, but I've spent the last 2 years by myself, even a little bit before that with the whole pandemic issue. Before that, I was struggling with my elderly dog, whom I had for 12 years.
So you have been a parent.
Yeah, I have been a parent, but I was struggling with his needs and struggling with my unbalanced need to put him first over my own needs. So like walking at the park every day, even though that's just ridiculous for the issues that I have. I had to do it. I was forced to do it by myself, and I couldn't. That's why I broke away from some friendships that I've made over the years, and indeed just sort of broke away from the world completely. And it's just gotten to a point where I'm not unhappy. Having done this and having gone through this, I am not an unhappy person to be totally alone. And I guess, well, it's definitely hard to admit that, and it was initially hard to admit that, and I felt like I was psychotic or something. The reality is very hard for me to be around people that are not even-tempered. And it's not that hard to not be even-tempered, but for some people I think it really is going against their very natural expression. And so it would be almost abusive to make that type of person not be themselves. They would have to be like I am with most everybody, which is trying to say the right thing in the right way and show the right amount of emotion, and also trying to tell how I feel. I think that's my biggest issue, is I don't share with anybody how I'm feeling or what I'm enjoying, or I don't share.
This is your opportunity to share.
Right.
So it's a learning curve.
But I know that you want to share, both want to share our experience, but we're trying to join our experience even though it's never been joined, really.
This is a really good point, is that we're both sharing our experiences with you, and sometimes what I've done as a mom and even as a mentor with Logan is to let it be all about Logan and try and share fewer experiences of my own for the reasons that I've told you about, but also because I have friends that I can share my experiences with. So I like to give Logan a mentor that he's comfortable with. I think all of us can observe how we behave around certain people, and if we know something that we do or say, or if a conversation isn't appropriate with a particular person, but it is appropriate with another person, that if we value our relationship with that individual, we will do our best to refrain from certain characteristics of our personalities that we know trigger that person and make them unable to have a close, authentic relationship with us. For example, I have attention deficit disorder, so I'm famous for interrupting. I have a friend who also has attention deficit disorder, so we interrupt each other constantly, and yet we have this train of thought and this conversation that can keep going because we know how to do that. But if I'm with someone else and I can just watch them shut their eyes and cringe if I interrupt them, or they'll say, as I was saying a lot, and then that'll remind me that, oh, I'm interrupting. So even though I'm sharing answers to your question and I'm sharing some of the lessons that I have learned, but I'm also learning those lessons still. I'm not a professional, or I'm not perfect at doing the things that we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm her mentor at this point with this stuff. I mean, I've learned everything that I know, and I am everything that I am because of what she's taught me and instilled in me. But now there's things that I've learned that she is not really needed to learn in up to now. And I hope that this can continue. You know, that it would be a shame to have us continue on being as disassociated with each other, but completely together until I die. That would suck, but it's not a comfortable direction to go in.
Yeah, well,
But losing Heather was very uncomfortable, and so I don't know how much more uncomfortable it could be than that.
Well, Logan and I are learning to have a new relationship with Heather being gone, because Heather required so much help. When her partner and aide moved away 3 years ago, then I stepped in and arranged for her to have an aide that could prepare her smoothies, because she needed a smoothie twice a day, every day. So we arranged for her to have an aide 4 days a week for 2 hours at a time, so that Heather and I could spend a 4-hour lunch together 1 day a week, and then I could help her do other things that she needed help with. But Logan, being a very highly sensitive, compassionate, empathetic person, he didn't want to ask me for help even if he needed it, because he knew Heather needed it more. And so we had a different relationship while Heather was alive, and now we're learning how to have this relationship together. In fact, you were talking to me about something that was real eye-opening.
Well, Heather was the rule maker of our family, and so we followed Heather's rules.
Or a way to put it is, Heather's disabilities were the rule maker of our family.
Yeah.
Her autism, her physical disabilities, she had esophageal spasms, so if we were on vacation or even here in town, if we wanted to go to lunch somewhere or have food brought in, Heather would be the one to decide what food we would eat. Or I should say, Heather's esophageal spasms would make the decision on what we could eat. And because of the way her muscular skeletal was affected from Miller syndrome, she couldn't sit on any hard chairs or certain couches or anywhere, so we had to go somewhere that would be comfortable for her to sit. So much of Logan and my experience together included Heather, so we both accommodated Heather, and now it's just Logan and me. So we're learning not only some of these skills that I'm talking about with you about parenting an adult, but Logan and I are having an adult experience that is more interconnected than the way it used to be.
Yeah.
And that's what you were referring to when you talked about closeness versus disconnected.
Might not be totally the right word, but disassociated. Like we know we have our responsibilities as mother and son to each other, but we also know there's that friction that for the most part is from me, and like Heather, it's a disability actually, so it's sort of always been incumbent on me to figure out a way to deal with this, and I've not really been able to get around certain things with our connection that I needed to get around for a lot of different reasons. You know, it's like you were just saying, I didn't want to burden you with, oh, you're helping Heather and now you have to help me, and so I just don't ask for help, and that sort of leaves me, well, always needing for help, but I also don't want help because I don't want to be a man and need my mom.
I can understand that. And that's not new for Logan. I mean, ever since he was 18 and moved out, right? You wanted to feel like a man. So one thing that this makes me think about is Logan and I have been doing this adult-mom relationship since he was 18, and he's going to be 42 in April. A lot of the best lessons that I've learned are from Logan. Just like he said, he's my mentor in so many ways because of his need and ability to communicate honestly and authentically, and through his sharing I've learned how to be less defensive, to give advice less less critical of his choices. I'm not perfect. I still fall into those pre-programmed traps. We've been doing this a long time and we've come a long way.
Yeah, it's been a very complex life.
And we're going to be growing in this area, just like all of you who have children who are soon to be adults, emerging adults, parents. When your children become parents and you're watching them parent their kids, that's opening up a whole nother experience of how to be the parent of an adult child who has their own children. And I just heard a quote that I think is a really good thing to keep in mind, and that is, keep your mouth shut and keep the welcome mat out in regards to your adult children. And that was Jim Burns who said that. And I thought that was very blunt, but very good advice to follow.
Yeah, you're learning, and it's helping me want to do this. It's because you are learning now how to do that. To tell somebody to keep their mouth shut is rude.
Well, and that's why I wanted to tell you that it's a quote. It is rude.
Right.
But it's something for a parent that values the relationship with their adult child to keep in mind, because it really drives the point home.
Yeah, we plan on coming back to this conversation.
That's a great idea. So in a future vlog, we will be able to come back and talk about more experiences that we've had as mom and adult child who has probably more of his mom's time and attention available to him to choose how he wants to use it or if he wants to use it, and more opportunity for me to learn to practice being a good parent of an adult child.
Yeah, and I have to be respectful.
And so do I. So that's a great note to end on. One of the most important things is being respectful and having a boundary to require respect from your adult child as well, if you don't feel like you're getting it.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.